Welcome to Source Not Found, show about the worst versions of your favorite things. Every other week, we talk about an IP, franchise, or fandom solely through its spin-offs, sequels, or side projects. Basically, anything but the source material. My name is Bill Woodall, and Sweet Home Video Game. Where the skies are so black.
Freebird!
Sweet Home Video Game. Mamiya, I'm coming home to you. Yes, it's true.
Beep, beep, beep-dee-doo-doo. I wanted to join in. You just got me too hyped. And I'm Brandon June, and I'm a man. Sometimes in these haunted mansions, you get wraiths. Sometimes you get evil dolls. Sometimes you get worms, and sometimes you just get man.
Or a wall. Just a fucking wall, dude. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our continuation of Spooky Season. Continuing on with ghosts for the most part. This week, we are covering Sweet Home, a 1989 Japanese NES game based around a Japanese movie with the same title. Basically, Resident Evil's granddaddy, and to be quite frank with you, if it was not based on a movie, I was going to be very upset that we were covering a source material.
Yeah. It only slightly fits the nature of our show because they released in the same year, but it is technically based on a pre-existing. The movie came out January 1989. The game came out late in '89, I think December.
This is not an LJN production. This is not
Capcom, baby.
This is not a movie tie-in. This is a Capcom product, baby.
I don't even know what you call it. I mean, it is a tie-in. It's just they developed it. Even if you look at the credits of the game, Juzo Itami and Kiyoshi Kurosawa both worked as producer or supervisor of the game. That's the producer and the director of the movie.
So I really want to ask a strange question here.
Yeah.
Because it's me, and I had no experience with this game or the movie or ever really heard of it before. I love some Evil. I love some Resident Evil. In fact, if I remember correctly, that was your nickname when we lived together.
It was.
However, I am not familiar with this title or franchise whatsoever. Have you seen this movie?
I have.
And?
I have. It's pretty good. It's not anything stupendous.
Wait, is it as good as 13
best.
Ghosts?
I'd rather watch it again than 13 Ghosts. Definitely. Fewer ghosts. Fewer ghosts, less good?
Hey, you know what?
The numbers don't lie. At its best moments, it kind of gave me slight House vibes. And we are both massive fans of the film House.
Yes, we are. Kung Fu, baby.
It's nowhere near close to being that unhinged or wild of a movie. But it does have some moments. And I've heard some ideas that it was kind of inspired by House.
Really? That doesn't necessarily surprise me. I mean, the game had some wicked House vibes.
It did, yeah. Just to set this up, I think we're getting in a little too deep. Before I maybe get into the movie or some specifics about it, what is Sweet Home? So some of you might not know this one because, it released in Japan. It did not release outside of Japan.
Nope.
Never got a Western release, never got localized. We both played it by way of a fan translation.
Different fan translations, I would like to point out.
Oh, did we?
Yeah,
okay.
My translation was poor at best.
Really?
My candle was called Waxy.
No, I think we played the same one.
Oh, did we?
Wait, did you pick up a tool or an amulet?
Tool.
Yeah, we had the same translation. There's a better one.
Okay,
a
cool.
more recent one.
Awesome.
That accurately translates the tool, which it's not described, you just pick up tool, as the amulet, which then, if you've seen the movie, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it's just translated as tool.
Cool.
But hey, you know what? It's not the greatest translation, but you know what? I have nothing but thanks and gratitude for the fans that did that because, the only other option is to play it in Japanese, which I thought about doing, but a little ambitious. The thing about games from this era, there's no kanji, which some might say, well, good. Kanji is the hardest part of Japanese to learn. You got to memorize all these thousands of characters. But really, if you've just got a big mass of kana text, and sometimes it's not like well spaced. A lot of Japanese text is not always like forthcoming with the spaces in between words. Then you're just trying to like parse out, where does this word begin or end? Where's the next one begin or end? Am I looking at shokaki or shokaki? Like, I don't even, like, it's really hard to parse out. And like, if you have no experience with the game, no context for a lot of the words, especially with fantastical stuff, what is it getting at? Whereas like the kanji make it clear, like, oh, it's definitely this reading and this meaning. But thank you to everyone who translated this game. I'm so glad to have it in English. It's an important game. It is, like you mentioned, it was the inspiration for the Resident Evil franchise, and you could argue it's the first survival horror game.
It is
definitely one of the
and not
first.
just survival horror RPG.
Yeah,
because I think we should wait until gameplay to really classify what this is.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of that stuff when we get into gameplay and get into the specifics of the game. But just 1989 NES game based on a movie, developed alongside a movie that released earlier that year. Spooky, scary experience. One of the first. Games that came out in 1989. I just want to kind of set the stage.
Sure, yeah.
One. What else is on the shelf as you're going in the store? Because that, to me, like when I play a game from a certain era, I try and look at it through that lens and judge it like, how would this have hit in 1989? If you were in the US, Dragon Warrior was coming out that year, but it was 3 years late. That came out in Japan in 1986. I tried to mostly just look at things that released in Japan this year because we're talking about a game that only released in Japan.
Sure.
We had Konami's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We had Mother, Earthbound Beginnings, Strider, Castlevania 3, River City Ransom. A lot of movie tie-ins, Back to the Future, Willow, which I didn't know there was a Willow NES game, but looking at it, like, of course there is. I'm going to maybe put in a request to do Willow it.
Is it LGN? Is it LJN?
That should have been the first thing I checked. I did not check. It looked kind of interesting.
Me. All right.
From the screenshots.
So we know what it's up against, right? That sounds awesome. But what is the game about? And I think that leads us into our first metric. And for those of you who haven't listened to one of our video game episodes before, we judge a game on 5 metrics: narrative, structure, gameplay, visuals, sound, and fun factor. We each give a score out of 10, and at the end of that, it adds up to a 100. Pretty easy stuff for Math Boy over here. I'm Math Boy. So let's hop...
Thank you for your service.
Every day, I salute myself. So let's hop right into narrative. So what is this movie about? What is this game about? And the question is, does the game convey what it needs to convey?
Right. I can just go ahead and read the synopsis from the instruction manual.
Cool.
Which serves as a synopsis of the movie. Like, they kind of go hand in hand.
And I think after that, we should give our scores before we talk about how the game does it.
Sure.
I feel like that feels fair.
Okay.
Yeah, let's hear this synopsis.
30 years ago, there was a great artist, Ichiro Mamiya. He built a mansion deep in the mountains, far from the city, and painted his frescoes there. He had a wife and child, and the 3 of them lived happily together. But some great misfortune befell them, and all 3 passed away. In the 30 years since then, no one has dared to go near the mansion, which has come to be feared as haunted. Now, 5 members of a TV crew have entered this forbidden place to report on the artworks painted by the genius Mamiya. But here a tragedy unfolds. The mansion shakes, the ceiling collapses, and they are now trapped inside. Ghosts of the Mamiya family appear. Can the 5 find a way out? How many will survive? A terrifying battle begins in Sweet Home. Starring. And so the cast is the same. Like, the characters you play as in the game are the same characters you meet in the movie. So you have Kazuo, director of the crew. You have Emi, daughter of Kazuo, along for the ride.
Interesting.
You have Taguchi. Taguchi is Taro in the game, at least in our translation. I don't know if this changes in other translations. It's the one character name that doesn't align, and I think it's just due to a misreading of the kanji or like his name. I don't know what happened there, but in the film, Taguchi Ryo.
So they named him after a spud because they couldn't figure it out.
I don't know if they thought they were looking at katakana there on I don't know what happened. But photographer of the crew, Akiko, producer, and Asuka, the reporter and also professional art restorer, and therefore responsible for the preservation of sought-out frescoes.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, man. Okay, so let's go ahead and give our scores.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I gave it a 9.5.
As much as I hate to admit it, I gave it a 7.5.
Okay. Do you want to go first and tell me why?
Yeah, sure. I can go first.
Okay.
The story is cohesive. It works well.
Mm-hmm.
I felt no real attachment to any of the characters outside of how they played in the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it didn't. I always make this mistake, and we've seen it before when it comes to NES games, because I play via an emulator or something. I don't have the console and the original cartridge. I have to find the game and purchase it or whatever someplace else. I also
played this one by way of an emulator just because we have to do the fan translation, right? You know.
So I also didn't look up the manual because that is what I do. So I had no idea Emmy was the daughter and how they all function together as a TV crew. You could have told me that they were a group of exorcists, and I probably would have liked it better. Like, the game does a passing job of telling a story. Definitely. Through the frescoes, through the clues, through the diaries, through everything you encounter, you get little bits and pieces of how things function. Unlike other NES games we have played in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But with as much work as they put into it, and maybe this is just translation and I didn't pick it all up, but there wasn't the amount of clarity that I would have liked.
Sure.
Like
that's fair.
I had to do external research to understand the story of the game, which for an NES game you were unable to do when this game was released. Which makes me say, if I played this game when it was released, I would have no fucking clue about several big instances of the story. And so that's why it still certainly passes. It is well above a pass. But I have to look at it through the lens of when it was released, as opposed to the fact that I have Google now.
Yeah, sure. I get that. The one thing I would say is that era, to me, the instruction manual is part of the experience. Like,
right, we've discussed this several times.
Yeah. It is assumed that the player will be reading through that as part of the experience of playing the game. Like, games from this era were not designed to just jump into without getting like 30 pages of backstory and like reading through the mechanics and really understanding, treating it like you would treat, like, I don't know, like these days we get the experience like jumping into a tabletop game for the first time, right?
Right.
Like, oh, you need to fully understand the systems of the game before you engage with the experience. So like just that first page that sets up the characters and what they're doing, and then goes through, like, it lists all the items in the game and their function. And even that will like give you some information about like why we have these items and their function in this world, The other thing is, and for me, this was an interesting part of the experience, and it was a positive, and I'm judging it accordingly, but I understand other people might not. To me, this was a multimedia experience. It was a game to be enjoyed alongside of a tie-in movie that were developed along with one another and that bolster one another. So you have events in the movie that unfold, and you go into the game and you see them like the backstory or the meaning or the greater depth of events in the movie that you can then enjoy in the game. And I know that's just a tie-in game, but something about the nature of how it was, there was a vision for the game that was being developed, and there was personnel on the development team. This isn't just like an LGN, like after the fact, a couple years later. I don't know, let's make a Beetlejuice game and we'll get them stomping bugs because, like,
sure.
Fuck it, why not?
So If I may, I have one small
Yeah.
problem with that.
Sure.
I am not allowed to look at it that way. Because if I did, that would make this game a source material.
That's a good point.
And that is not what we do. If I directly connect it to the movie that it is quote unquote tied into, then it is alongside the movie as a source material, as opposed to secondary to the movie as a secondary product, a spin-off of the film. So like you actually sent me the link to the movie that you can watch. Like I can find this movie online. I would probably have to get...
Actually, for anyone who's interested, if you, as of recording today, it is available for free on YouTube. You can watch the whole film in full.
I neglected to do that by choice because I was afraid that it would skew me away from our goal. And I'm very happy you watched it because this sends us way back to the beginning of the podcast. Just like... Bo knows nothing. Brandon has experienced these things, you know, like that's what we're looking at now. And that's why that's honestly, if I would have seen the film and read the manual, I would be willing to bet money I would be at an 8.5.
Yeah. I'm glad you didn't, to get the difference of perspective, right? Because the thing is, like, I know I'm pushing it. We're not supposed to talk about the source material as much as possible. The thing is, like, I guess I just want to put out a recommendation that people, if you are interested in these experiences, to do it that way. They really do complement one another well. And they're both, like, the movie's not the greatest movie. I think this game is an important game that people should play if they have interest in the medium and in the history of it and in the genre. I couldn't say the same about the movie, but it works well as a complement to this. But for me, like, getting into the game, I watched the movie before playing the game. Like, oh, Asuka has a vacuum. In the film, she's the art restorer, and that's how she vacuums off the dust, 30 years of dust that are like caked on these frescoes. Made total sense. And then, of course, it has other functions in the world, right? Like vacuum up the broken glass on the floor and things like that, right? So like all of those things made sense without having the game having to explain them to me. So I know I had a different experience than you. The one thing I would say is you can maybe dismiss the movie or like not count it, but I feel like the manual, if there's something you didn't get from the game, but it's in the manual, you can't knock the game for that because in 1989, that's the experience. Like you are getting a full package, you're going home with your box, you're pulling out the cartridge and you're looking at the manual and reading it in full before you engage with the experience. And a lot of the stuff I think is sufficiently explained in that manual to set up the game.
If that is the case, which I do believe you, and I think because I believe you, I'll knock it up to an 8. I will give it a full 0.5 increase based on my own ignorance.
I don't want you to change your score. I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, but I do think it's fair. Well. Because, like, you are very correct in that if I were to purchase this game, unlike the other games that we have covered NES-wise, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Beetlejuice, Bible Adventures, I don't know if I would have read through those manuals because I know the IP. But this would have been fresh. So I would have needed to know the characters and the world. So I probably would have so this came out in 89, so I was 3 years old. Not to date me or the podcast. So I probably would have picked this up when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I would have needed to look through the manual. So that's why I'm upping it a full half a point.
There are a lot of, we're going to get into this in gameplay, but a lot of systems and a lot to figure out, and not having the manual, that would be a very difficult experience because it's kind of obtuse. Now, you just mentioned Friday the 13th, I will say. That's another game that maybe, there's a lot of systems in that game too, right? We talked about how ambitious it was, even though it wasn't enjoyable. Also, fun fact, that came out the same year.
Also a fun fact, I don't know if this matters, but in this game and in that one, the pitchfork is the strongest fucking weapon in the game, which is idiotic. Sorry.
Pitchfork, or in my translation, the pictctfork.
Yeah,
There was something weird going.
PITCT fork.
Something like that. Yeah.
But like, what the fuck is up with a pitchfork? It's a pitchfork. Like, make the silver sword or a rune axe the strongest weapon. Like, it's very there
were some weird choices. You find forks at some point in the game after you've found like the fucking soul blade and the rune axe, and they actually outperform those weapons for a time. It's wild choices. But just to stick with the narrative a little bit longer, the reason I gave it a 9.5, that's a very high score.
Yeah.
Again, through the lens of 1989. NES games, they can only do so much. Limited space, and we're still like early in the medium, the way we convey a story and the level of characterization you can expect from your characters. So when I was looking at like other NES RPGs, like you do have some, like Final Fantasy II has a lot of individual strong characterization, whereas like 1 and 3 don't. They're sort of like, you just kind of imbue them with whatever you feel like imbuing them with.
Right.
You give them a job, and that's, so it runs the gamut, right? But as a setup, like that is a well thought out story. I have a clear motive. It sets a lot of atmosphere. I know why I'm in this mansion. I know what I'm doing. All of my activities in the game throughout to the very end, I'm looking for frescoes. I'm photographing them. I'm getting clues.
Yes.
The clues shed light upon my next task, but at the same time, what I really appreciate about this game, in this era, a lot of adventure games, a lot of interactive fiction games, a lot of point and click games can have very just random ass puzzle solutions. Like, why did I just do what I did? Why did it, like, going back to Leisure Suit Larry, like, why did I just put the fucking, I don't even know, the rat in the condom and then drop it in the vending machine or whatever it was, It's like, well, it's a way you can use these objects to complete a task. But in this game, I felt like it often aligned with the plot. Like, a lot of times you would find a diary entry or a fresco and it would shed some light on, like, the Mamiya family and what they're doing and why, and, like, it would hint at places to go. And a lot of those clues came back in the final battle.
Yeah, they did.
They were like hinted at along the way. And like the diary entry that talked about like her husband, Lady Mamiya's husband, and then like having to like put the diary in her face, be like, look what you're causing your husband to go through with like your behavior, with what you've done, throwing kids in the fucking furnace, look how you're hurting, not just the kids, your husband, stuff like that. Bringing all things like full circle. Giving me 5 characters that you don't get anything from them. They are their function. Asuka is the vacuum wielder. Emmy is the key holder. You know what I mean? But you can sort of imprint, like you have their connection to one another and you have their function in the world. And then if you've seen the movie, and I'll try to like forget about that, that does further bolster them. But like that removed, you put a lot of yourself as the player into these characters. But if you do that, you have a connection to them to a certain degree because of like how precious they are for this function. Because in the game, you really need them to complete tasks. I think just sometimes I can feel a connection to a character, not based on like their dialogue or their behavior, but just like what they mean to me as the player, if that makes sense. Like, okay, I could maybe, I could lose Kazuo because I have other sources of like I found the matches, but I don't have another key. Like I gotta hang on to Emmy. Emmy is precious to me. Like I don't even know what I'm gonna do if I get to a door and it's locked if I lose her. Because like early in the game you haven't found the wire yet. Or God, I gotta have Akiko, right? I don't have any other way to heal a party member if they get, cursed, paralyzed.
I guess my question is this. Mm-hmm. How does that matter to the narrative as opposed to how it impacts gameplay? Because because what you're basically describing is characters used as items in the game, which is what they do become. Mm-hmm. As opposed to things that push a story forward, as opposed to the story that you're creating for yourself.
Sure. I get that. I guess, again, to 1989 lens, it's harder to separate some of these things. Like to me, an NES game, it can only do so much in terms of like a bespoke narrative. Like the narrative it comes out through other parts of the gameplay process, if that makes sense.
Sure.
It's sort of like I'm not looking for like there are a couple cutscenes, but not really. There aren't like lengthy dialogue trees or anything like that. So it's like, where are you taking me? I brought this up in NES, like when we've covered NES games in the past. What's the setup? What are the characters? Do I have a clear goal? Do you follow through on that? Do you take me to interesting locations and places? So a lot of this is like visual stuff. It's sound stuff. It's gameplay stuff. But that's the narrative experience. That's how you experience a narrative in a game like this in this era. And so the fact that like we had strong individual characters that like I could keep track of, they're not just like blank slates, nothings. Like I'm putting a lot of myself in as the player. I know I get that. And also I'm bringing in knowledge of the movie. So I can't like forget that. But just like having a connection, like you're the art restorer, you have a vacuum to vacuum off the dust, and then you can use it in these other ways. There's something there with like the connection. It's not just like arbitrary choices. Like, why are you holding this? You just are, like you have your photographer holding the camera. You have Akiko as the producer, and she's the one that heals everybody. She's sort of like the matriarch of the group almost, right? She oversees and makes sure things are functioning. And then she's also your healer. So I just thought there was some smart usage there with how like the items you chose to give each character aligned with their function in the world, their personality from the movie. And I thought that was great. I thought the diary entries were very good. I thought it was atmospheric. I love the locations. We're in a mansion the whole time, but we do go outside. And within that mansion, we see a breadth of different environments. And we go some really interesting places. It brings me around the mansion. There were only a couple times that I really got stuck, and it was just me missing something or not like is going to come up in gameplay, but like the game giving you a clear solution, and then you think you have the solution, you try it, but like, oh, the right character wasn't carrying both rings and they weren't at the front of the party, and so it didn't register that you have the correct puzzle solution, shit like that. But aside from some stuff like that, like I always knew what I needed to be doing and where. Like I had to wander to like find a locked door that I missed, but aside from that, I felt like it really was paced well. And again, it's sort of the narrative, is sort of the gameplay, but yeah, I just thought it moved. It took me places.
That was kind of my question. And I feel like it's something we haven't discussed before, and maybe we don't need to discuss it now, or maybe we don't need to discuss it in the future. But everything you're saying about what makes this a strong narrative for you comes from so many other categories that we cover.
Sure.
That, like, normally I am looking at the story only, not how the gameplay necessarily impacts the story or the locations and the visuals and the sounds and things like that. I am looking at how the story flows to me as a consumer of content, I guess. As opposed to the way the characters interact with the world is what helps push the narrative forward, in the fact that they are tools to push a narrative. Where, like, for me, most of the time, I want a happy ending, or I want, a romantic lead, or something where I can see growth of a narrative. And so that maybe this is entirely my perception of how I perceive narrative in games, because I also don't play retro games as often as you do, except for when we cover something like this. So it's hard for me sometimes to jump on board the narrative train as strongly as you do. But I understand what you're saying and how it does directly relate to how you are taking in the narrative, but it's not something that I ever consider as part of the narrative directly for me, because it's not the story I'm being given. If that makes sense.
And it does. That's totally fair. Like, this is just the way I look at it.
Sure.
I totally understand your perspective. To me, like, that's what we when we talk about our criteria here, we talk about like the narrative experience, not just story. So I treat it as like a narrative experience that comes through in a multitude of different ways. It would be like to me, if someone said like, I just played Elden Ring, man, that story sucked. And I would ask them like, well, did you listen to all the NPCs in the world? And did you read the item descriptions and things like that? Like, no, I just watched the cutscenes and like, I didn't see the story conveyed through that. Like, well, to me, you have to like go the extra mile in a game like that to have the full narrative experience. If you don't, then yeah, you don't get much story. And so it's like you have to opt in or you have to choose to experience the narrative in a different way. I know this is different. It's like a different way that it comes through, but I guess I just mean like I'm open to that. I'm open to a narrative being shown in a number of different ways. Like sometimes, yeah, you just get everything you need through a cutscene. Sometimes you have lengthy dialogue trees that as the player, you could opt in to talk to every NPC in town or you couldn't. And that's going to impact how much story you get. And some of those are more like familiar with an experience from this era like this. That's why I was open to like, well, here it's almost like it's what The Matrix tried to do with Enter the Matrix on the PS2.
Yeah.
You know, we have the movies and you need to see the movies and then you play this game and it like fits into this part that actually isn't really explained in the movies. We have a lot of stuff that isn't shown on film and this fills the void. But then you need to have seen the movie to like bring that knowledge into the game. And they work with one another, you know? And I like that idea as a multimedia experience because it's just a novel concept to me.
Yes, but we're not covering the movie.
I know that. But I just mean like, even within the game, I'm just more open to, yeah, you didn't give me like individual characters with like character arcs. They don't grow as people. They're not really people, but also, it's 1989, and I don't expect too much of that from a game like this on the NES. And if you have given me a story and a goal and a motivation and some individual characters that like matter to me to any degree, and like a villain that we actually, it's not just a one-dimensional monster at the end.
Definitely that.
We understand some part of her and this family's experience. I can't ask for much more, to be honest. Especially since all that is just the experience of putting me in the mansion. And fuck, I love the mansion. I love the setting of this game and going through and finding all these weird, creepy monsters and ghosts and stuff and going down into the basement and going out to the courtyard and sailing across the lake. That to me is narrative. That's the journey I'm on. And it's conveyed, like it comes up with the gameplay that you're doing there and how it looks visually and how it sounds. But ultimately, those are ways of visually and auditorially like representing what I'm doing, what my journey was, where did I go and what did I do there, if that makes sense. That's just the way I look at it.
Yeah.
So for me,
I think mostly great. We just look at it in this case especially differently, which is kind of wild. And yet we both go back and forth about this, and I scored it as a very strong B, and you scored it as an A. Like, it's not like I'm going for a 3 narrative, and you're going for a 9.5. It's just, it's an interesting conversation.
It is, and I like that we differ on it, because we kind of, other listeners and other players are going to look at it in their own ways, and that's sort of the breadth of
especially people emulating it. Especially people emulating it, and they're like, I'm not going to look up the manual. I'm going to play this game and jump in, and don't do that.
Read the manuals. Read the manual.
Read
the manual.
Read the fucking manual. And speaking of reading the fucking manual, let's jump into gameplay. What'd you think?
I gave it a 9.
That blows my mind.
What'd you give it?
I gave it a 7.
Okay. You want me to go first this time?
Yeah, go first, because I feel like I'm going to have some strong thoughts.
Okay. I do too. I loved this game.
Obviously.
Yeah. It's not just limited to narrative. What an interesting, wild-ass game. It took me a while. I streamed this. It took me a couple of streams. It took me a few hours to sort of think about it the right way. Because I went in thinking like, it's a survival horror game with some like light RPG mechanics. And I was treating it that way. I was running from a lot of battles. I was really being conservative with my item usage, and I was getting fucking wrecked.
Yeah.
And eventually I just thought, let me play this as a role-playing game. Let me take an hour and go grind in an early area to level my characters up and get some footing here before I go into the next area where like the wraiths show up or whatever. And that totally changed my experience. And then from that point on, like, oh, no, it's a role-playing game. And it is. It plays like a JRPG that you would expect from this era. You walk around open environments, you hit random encounters, you go into a battle screen with turn-based menu selections of attack, run, use an item.
Pray.
The survival horror portion comes in with you have no way of healing your characters outside of using tonics. And there's a limited number of tonics in the game.
23.
Akiko, I mentioned, is my healer. Is it 23?
23 tonics in the entire game.
Well, I definitely missed a few. I did leave I didn't end up needing a lot of them.
Oh, fuck
I
you.
expected to based on this is a game where I struggled hard like the first third of it. And then once I sort of figured out what it wanted from me, and yeah, after that, I mean, there's some fucking cheap shit in this game for sure.
Yeah.
But I feel like the vast majority of the cheap shit comes early on when you still don't really know what the game wants from you. But yeah, I mean, there are traps. There are like, I almost want to call them like early QTEs. Like you'll be walking through the mansion and then just suddenly like a chair or like a statue or something that's like picked up by a poltergeist comes hurling towards you. And you go into like a QTE screen where you have like 4 options. Do you want to duck? Do you want to dive?
Do you want to explain
right?
what a QTE is?
Yeah, quick time event. So gamers, if you played games in like the mid-aughts, you're probably very familiar with these. If not, they sort of fell out of fashion. We get them in different versions these days. Like we still get a lot of like, you're Kratos, you got to like hammer square to pick up the heavy tree trunk.
My personal favorite is Leon Kennedy in Resident Evil 4 fighting Krauser. Yeah.
Yep. That's an example top of mind for me. For me, QTEs, I associate them with Shenmue because that's the game that really introduced me to them.
Yep.
And that was back in 2000 on the Dreamcast. But yeah, you get like that kind of stuff where you have to quickly make a decision. If you wait too long, you just get hit by whatever it is. So we've got like RPG mechanics and we have like a range of different monsters and they all look great. That's going to be visual stuff. But then you have the stress of like, there's no end to take your characters to, like in a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Quest. If you run out of tonics, you're fucked. There are hazards within like these QTEs. There are hazards where like, there are chasms throughout the mansion where the floor is collapsed and you have to use a board to get across as a bridge. And you can only walk across it so many times and then it breaks and then you're fucked. And there are only so many boards in the game. You can really like, and when your characters fall through the chasm, you have a brief window to go rescue them if you have another character with like a rope or something. If you don't do that in time, they're just gone. And then you're down to a party of 4 or 3. Or I lost my whole, like the first couple hours I played this, I just played it through and lost everybody and had to restart. So that like there's a stress, there is terror, there's horror conveyed as part of this experience. You have limited inventory. Each character can carry they have their key item, which you can never remove. And if they die, that's just gone. You do find replacements for, Asuka's vacuum, Emi's key, whatever it is. But if that character dies and you don't have that replacement, you just don't get that item anymore. Then you can carry 2 other items and then a weapon. So like a lot of the things that would be familiar to you if you played the survival horror genre, the limited inventory space, the wandering around a creepy environment looking for keys and backtracking, the stress of limited heals, limited, fixed number of items in the world. Yeah, like it was all there. It was crazy to see how much of it was there. What was really wild is like stuff like opening a door and you get that close up of the door opening animation. Like, oh, this is just Resident Evil. This is the loading screen from the original Resident Evil where you like.
Also done by Capcom.
Zoom in on the, yeah. You see the lineage there. And that was very fun to like see the seed, see the DNA trace back into this and see how much of it was there in 1989. As opposed to like, you have that as well as these like sort of larger gameplay, like design themes and choices that come out. So it was satisfying as an RPG. It was satisfying as a survival horror game. I mentioned before in narrative, I loved exploring the mansion. I loved all of the enemies. I thought the puzzles were well telegraphed. It was always fun. There was like some puzzly elements, like how am I going to get across this chasm? There was a lot of like, the cool thing that can also be kind of tedious is like you manage your parties. You can have a party of as many as you like, but up to 3 at once. And so you have 5 characters. I was going to say,
not as many as you would like. You have 5 characters and you cannot go above 3 people in your party at any given time.
Yeah. And so it fascinated me and I thought it was a very interesting design choice. Like I have these 2 parties and I can take them to disparate parts of the mansion and get them doing different tasks and trade items between them. And I have to use that a lot. And I have to get the other party out of a sticky situation with the other party that's not quite in danger sometimes. Like I have to go save them all if they fell into a pit and are getting swirled down into some weird orifice at the bottom of the basement pit, whatever was going on there, the Sarlacc pit. Stuff like that. I thought that was very fun. Or like, oh, my healer, she's in the other party, but I don't like. It was a part of the survival horror experience again, where like I'm in the item room, I'm in the safe room. Here I am at the item chest. I have 6 slots. Chris, Jill, whoever it is, they only have so many slots that I can fill. Do I want to go out there? Do I want to take my grenade launcher and some ammo in case I run into a hunter? But then I don't know where this key goes yet, but I have a feeling I might run into the door where it does go. Do I want to be safe? And then if I get to that room, I get all the way there, then I'm not going to have as many spots to like pick up items. It's like these interesting choices, the stress of that was all here, and it came through in the party selection as well. Like, okay, I can only take 3 people. I think I want to take Akiko because if I run into an enemy that's going to curse me and paralyze one of my characters or poison one of my characters, she's the only one that can heal them. But then I got to make sure I have Tato, and really I should have Asuka too, because if I find a fresco, I need Asuka to vacuum off the potential dust. I need Tato to photograph it. But then that means I got to leave Kazuo here. What if I hit something where I have to burn it with my lighter? And I like that stress. I like the choices there, and it sometimes becomes very frustrating. Like, oh, fuck me. I came all the way down here, and I don't have the character I need for that. I just got to go back, or I got to bring the other party down. It does get tedious, and you can sort of get like all fucking 3 stooged up, like blocking each other in the doorway where no one can get through. You're all just like clusterfuck together. That happens a lot, and there's a lot of like micromanaging. Like, okay, let me play as Akiko, break her away from the party, move her one at a time. I'm gonna move one at a time, every character out of the way of this doorway, then bring the other party through, and then go back to every individual character, link them back to the team, and that can get kind of tedious, But it was interesting. It was an interesting. I just liked the idea there to mash these genres up and try these wild ass ideas, and sometimes it gets kind of tedious and frustrating. But overall, I thought it was very cool. I really did. I had a good time.
Any game, in my opinion, that can unexpectedly party wipe you or soft lock you out of areas, I feel is frustrating as fuck. And this game did that to me 3 separate times.
Okay. What happened?
So I lost Emmy.
Mm-hmm.
Relatively early on.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get another key until much later on in the game.
Yeah, you have to find the wire, right?
And you can find other keys as well as like secondary items. Like the gold key, and there's another key as well that helps you open doors.
Those keys don't function like...
Not like hers,
right.
But they do open specific doors.
They do. Yeah.
But same sort of thing. I understand how exciting it is for how what this game was introducing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But as a player, removing himself from any sense of nostalgia or what this game is going to become in the future, or what they're going to make of it and its ideas in the future.
Yeah.
I remained pissed off at this game. I was fucked off all 24 hours, 20-ish hours I played this game.
Okay.
Getting party wiped. Okay, so I had Kazuo, Emi, and Akiko in my party at like level 11 in the downstairs area with the mirrors.
Yep.
You walk in one of those rooms, there are statues that are fountains. And when you look at them, someone says, man, I really wish we could break these fountains. That'd be great. I had my mallet, so I broke the fucking fountains. Guess what? That does fuck all. If you walk into the water, even after the fountains are gone, you cannot get out. Like rope, bow, another party coming into the room, you cannot go but like 1 square forward, and then you get shot back and you're taking damage constantly. So it wiped all 3 of my strongest players.
Mm.
And then I lost the other 2 in just a random fucking battle because I didn't have my healer, I didn't have my key, and I didn't have my tank.
Yeah. That kind of stuff, that happened to me a lot with one of the later areas with the icy floors where you need the pickaxe to fuck me. Like, yeah, they would get swept to the bottom and just get like, you know, they would like end up on the spikes or whatever was like at the bottom of that, and they would be stuck there. I would need another character to go down and rescue them. It got very tricky and very frustrating. That's true.
And with that, I don't like the fact that you can have 3 people in one party and 2 in another. I understand the difficulty it brings to the game, which is cool in retrospect. But just give us 6 fucking characters. Like, give us 2 parties of 3 that can break off, so at least one party isn't constantly hamstrung by the lack of an extra attack.
Yeah, that's a good point. Although, I get your opinion there. Sometimes that was beneficial to have 2 instead of 3 in rooms where, oh god, these piss me off. I just want to be clear. This game pissed me off. Like, there are a lot of frustrating
Are you
things.
talking about the homing roaming
the specters
monsters?
and shit that comes by and will just like carry off a character and just throw them into some random ass part of the mansion?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a lot easier, like even just one character. Like I was making that choice sometimes. You're like, you know what? I got to get something at the end of this hallway. Along the way, I'm probably going to hit some random battles. And if I can't run from that, maybe I'm going to get cursed or maybe I'm just going to die. But I think it would be easier to just take whoever it is as a single person and run to the end and try and get it so that like there's like less of a tail behind me, you know, like other characters trailing behind to get picked up and pulled out of there. So again, just like I'm making interesting choices. They're frustrating.
Here's the last thing I'm going to say about gameplay on my end, because we're going really, really in depth. We talked about this in Beetlejuice. I struggle with a game that the only way you can succeed is knowing you have to grind without the game telling you need to grind.
Yeah. I
got so far so many times and got completely fucking party wiped. That's the reason this game took me like 25 hours or whatever. Like, I could probably beat it in 8, but I kept trying to play the game as what I assumed was intended.
Sure.
And so by the time I hit the courtyard, I was only level 5 or 6. And man, you get fucked.
You do. I hit the courtyard before I sort of had the revelation I was talking about.
Yeah.
That was a tough area for me. Yeah.
And when all of a sudden you've been playing for 3.5 hours, 4 hours, and you feel pretty confident, and then all of a sudden characters are just getting hardcore wiped in 2 hits. You're like, oh my, what the fuck just happened? This isn't survival horror anymore. This is a fucking Souls-like. Like, what am I doing with myself? And it's not bad game design. I don't think it's bad game design. But it wasn't good gameplay for me.
Sure, I get that.
And the fact that the wood broke and there's limited amount of wood, fuck off. Come on.
Yeah, it's stuff like what you described that early on, that's what was also pushing me to treat it as a different genre of game. Like, oh, it's so easy for characters to just die suddenly, and then you don't have them anymore for the rest of the game. So I was thinking, like, this must be a much shorter experience. Maybe I'm not playing it as a role-playing game. Maybe I'm playing it as, like, an adventure game, or I don't know. I don't even really know how to think about it. Like a survival horror game with, like, that's just how you encounter the combat is like a JRPG kind of system. But aside from that, it's going to function this way. And that's why I just ran from enemies for a long time. And, you know, I played it that way and then realizing, no, you need to play it as an RPG. So they are kind of at odds with one another, right? You need to spend the hours to invest in leveling up your characters, I think, to have a good time. I have some experience playing RPGs from this era, so it was kind of familiar to me. Like, oh yeah, you don't just like roll through the original Final Fantasies. Like you need to grind. And you don't have to. I do, because it gets fucking tough later on, you know. And that's part of the experience of a game from this era. That's how they pad out the experience. That's how you get your money's worth. You play it for a long time. And a lot of that time is just grinding. So I did some of that, and then it really changed it. Like, oh no, so you do have like the long adventure of an RPG, but then as you're mentioning, it's so easy to just suddenly lose everybody or lose a key character. And then I think there are, especially early game, so many ways to soft lock yourself. You are absolutely correct. If you don't get to some of those first rooms that have the replacement items,
you're fucked.
And that character is holding a key item, you just got to restart. I couldn't see another way to continue.
Yeah.
There's that. There's some very cheap shit. I mentioned it near the end of the game when you go down through the fireplace into like the caverns, the sewers down below, and there's these rooms, and you just blindly go into a room. You don't know what's in there, and the whole party falls down to this pit, and you cannot get back out. And then I didn't realize I couldn't get back out. It wasn't clear to me there was like an elevation drop. I brought both parties in because there was a fresco. I was like, I'll just like, you know, I got Tato in this party, I got Asuka in the other one. I'll just bring both parties in. I don't see any reason to not do that, and then we'll just all progress as a party. Because I tended to keep my parties close together, because a mechanic I really like is when you take one party into battle, you might have 2 or 3. One of the options you have is to call, and you can call the other party over, and then you leave the battle, you control that other party, you bring them over, and then you have all 5 together on one battle screen.
Yeah,
and
but
you can really wail on whatever it is.
It's not user friendly. Like that entire process is not user friendly at all. Just give us a 5-person fucking party if that's the intent.
Yeah. I mean, that is, I wonder, is it maybe just like limitations, like hardware limitations at the time that would make it hard to have 5 characters, or maybe it's just like to have that many characters trailing behind you on the screen. I'm not sure. Or maybe it's just like it was a deliberate choice just because. But I get that. I do. It means like so many of these things I'm describing, it means a lot of micromanaging parties and where people are in menus and going back and forth, and it does get tedious. I do get it. I will give you that. But yeah, to bring both parties into this room, and then we look at the fresco, and then like that's what sets off the pit to start dragging us down. And then it was a second of like me leaving the fresco screen, like the close-up screen, to like look at it, and then it's just like someone yells out, "Help, we're being sucked down," and there's just immediate game over.
Yeah.
Immediate game over. Like no chance to do anything because all my party members were in this room, and then the trap kicked off, and it just, you can save in this game. There's one save file.
Yeah.
So I was thinking like, luckily, well, we played it on an emulator. I used multiple save states.
I had one.
That improved my,
and it fucking sucked.
That I would have fucked myself. I would have had to start over again then if I'd only been using one. Like the game, and I try to play them as they're intended a lot of times, even when I'm on an emulator, but I don't know. Having the option there, like I did get a little scummy, especially like the end of one of my streams when I was going for like almost 7 hours. I can't deal with this bullshit right now. I'm just going to reload. I don't want to. This character got carried all the way the fuck over there, and I don't feel like going to get them. I'm just, you know what, take it back. But if I had saved on my one save file after bringing everyone into that room, then that's just, you got to restart the game because there's no way to get out of that room with everyone down there. And that's my one save file, and now we're all there. There's no saving me. It's just over. And things like that would be more forgivable if it were a different genre of game, if it weren't a lengthy role-playing game. You just think like, man, you might have put in 20 hours at that point and have a fully leveled up party, and then just your party wiped, and it's all over, and you got to restart, you know? And again, NES games from this era, I get it. Limited memory.
I don't get it.
I get it in terms of, I don't like it. That's why a lot of these games from this era, like, I don't have nostalgia for them. I was too young, really. A lot of times I'm doing my gaming homework, and like, okay, that's just like the frustrations of the era. Like, hey, we can only fit so many levels and areas on this cartridge. There's only so many things we can show you. So how do we give you a lengthy experience? How do we give you your money's worth for this game that you just bought, that you took home, and like, that's your one game for maybe months. Like if you're a kid, you know, maybe you get a couple games a year. Who knows? So, okay, if you make it brutally difficult and you make it so you can only get so far usually on a certain life until you've like mastered the game. You just go back through it again and again and again and you perfect it. And so there is that going on. It's less forgivable, I want to say. It's less fun in a game like this, in a role-playing game where you have such investment in maintaining your status, right? Like if it's a platformer, like, fuck. Now I just died. I got all the way to level 5. Now I got to start level 1 again, but I'll be really good. And like if I'm good at the platformer, I can get back to where I was in like an hour or two, maybe, you know? Whereas this, like, no, I went grinding. I had everyone at like level 15. Shit, you know? It's really, there are moments where the combination of genres, you get the worst of both worlds. I will give you that. But if you play it like I did and can revert back to a save from 20 minutes before everything, all the shit hit the fan, and get a little cheap with it, it's mostly fun.
Sadly, how the game was made is not that.
I know. I'm getting a little. Today I'm choosing to engage with the game in specific ways that increase my enjoyment.
That's fair. I mean, hey, whatever makes you genuinely in this case, whatever makes you happy, because I think that's how games should be enjoyed.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not knocking that. Like I don't have any guilt about it, but I should maybe think about like if I'm giving it a specific numerical score. I don't know. But then in 1989, I feel like this stuff was more forgivable and more familiar. And so I think about it on that front as well. Yeah, man, I don't know. I just like, it's a game like I've brought up a couple times like, oh man, Friday the 13th. I hated this fucking game, but I appreciate the ambition. And this was a game like I so appreciate the ambition and it mostly works. And a game that is so ambitious and trying so many different things, combining genres and just like basically creating a new genre. There's going to be some growing pains, and the fact that like it was mostly fun for me in spite of like these moments that like, oh, that was a bad choice or that was very frustrating. The fact that it mostly succeeded was so impressive to me. I got to rank it really highly. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I think a good 40 minutes of this episode is going to be Brandon vamps about this game because I'm just not I'm not there, dude. Like
it's fair. I
thought
yeah.
I thought it had a lot of great things going for it. And now we can get to one of those things in visuals.
Hell yeah.
For the time, I gave it a 10.
I gave it a 9.5.
Okay.
I don't even know the thought of like not giving it a perfect 10. I mentioned before I loved the breadth of environments I went to. There are the final dungeon kind of area. The final lead up to Lady Mamiya, where you have your final boss encounter, is like this weird nightmarish, like they're like kind of fuchsia faces in the floor and you're like walking through this abyss, you know? But it's pretty short lived. And I just thought like, you took me a lot of places in this mansion and gave me a range of different environments, but maybe just like a little bit more of that. Like in terms of the background settings and areas. I feel like seeing that you took me to some wild places here, like I wanted a little bit more of that.
There is not,
but it's a small quibble.
I have less than a minute about what I want to say about this because it is so fucking good. The sprites,
it really is.
The sprites all showed you what they could do and what they were willing to do. They were all different and noticeably so. Every enemy for 1989 looked incredible.
Agreed.
The environments were good. The little miniature cutscenes, we didn't need those, but they were wonderful.
Yep.
The problem was for me, and when I say problem, I mean problem for other games and not this one. I compared it to the other NES games we played. And it was head and shoulders above all of those games visually. Without a single question, without a doubt in my mind. It was so far above them. It was incredible. When it came to, I mean, yeah, some of the sprites, like the Maniac and the Giant are the same sprite but different colors, or the same image but different colors. And even then, they're fucking cool looking. Like, I don't care. Good. The Madman and the regular man are very similar, but they have like a different color scheme and there's like a different background and stuff. Fine. It's 1989. It's still well and good noticeable that these are different enemies, and it's wonderfully done. Maybe simplistically, but who the fuck cares? It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool.
It's what I brought up earlier about memory limitations. Like, if you read about the development of these games, like, I did a deep dive on Final Fantasy a couple years ago. I'm just a Final Fantasy fan. Like, that game, like, and probably most NES games of the era, like, the walking animations, that's just it's mirroring the sprite. It just flips back and forth to save memory. Like, we're down to that level where we have the singular sprite and we just flip it back and forth as we move it around, because we don't have the memory for, like, individual motions and animations. So you do get a lot of, like, color palette swapped enemies and locations and stuff, because there's only so much space on this cartridge. We got to get the most out of everything. We got to repeat tiles and build the environments that way. And knowing that, God, this game looks good. I've mentioned I love the mansion. So atmospheric, so creepy. Lightning strikes and shadows and chasms where, like, the floor breaks away and specters swooping in. You have stuff happening on the exploration screen, the main screen, as you go through the mansion. You have ghosts appearing there. And then you go into these battle screens where you just have, like, these gorgeous pixel art enemies. Sometimes they even get, like, you get the animations of, like, the pustules bubbling.
Yep.
On this character. There's some surprising gore in the movie. I didn't expect it, because at first it's a lot of, like, some cool, like, lighting effects with, like tendrils of shadow, like, chasing a character down a hallway. It's like, oh, they're doing a lot with, like, understated, sort of practical, shadowy visual effects there. And then you get to a scene where, like, oh, the character's just, like, melting before your eyes. Like, his eyeballs are just, like, bursting and, like, goo is dripping down, like, this melting flesh. Is really nasty. And you get some of that, and you get some, like, animation with, like, just the melting face in the game is so gnarly. I don't know why. You know what? I'm going to just make it a 10. I don't know. I just thought, like, when I give it a 10, like, I always hesitate, but I don't have anything to say other than I just maybe would like to have gone into some more, like, I loved that last area. I really did. I guess that's just what I was thinking of. Like, man, like, some more, like, hellish kind of dungeon areas would have been very cool. Like, I just felt like the last area was very truncated. You know what I mean? Like, I get into, like, there's a series of pathways leading to.
It had to be.
I know, but it's just,
you go
I'm used
from
to, like,
mansion,
a long, lengthy,
mansion to hell. Like that's just how it.
Yeah, I just meant, like, as a long, like, I'm used to lengthy final dungeons that really test you and lead up to the final boss. And this was, like, the real final dungeon was just before that. Like, the final walk up to Lady Mamiya. Like, there's some enemies. You're mostly just dodging, like, bullshit on the screen that's going to carry your character's weight and getting, like, hints about the battle as you go up to her.
Yeah.
But it was a very cool area, and I just kind of maybe wanted a little more there. But, that's just me wanting stuff. I have nothing but praise for how this game looks. It is gorgeous. Agreed. It is creepy. It looks good for the time, and just, it looks good now. One thing while streaming it that people kept saying is, I just can't believe this game is from 1989.
Yeah, it looks incredible.
And the user interface is good. It's clear. Like, there's a lot of micromanaging and it's tedious, but and you have to get used to how the menus function and stuff like that. But it's clear. Like, there's clarity in
absolutely.
The battle menus and all
agree
that.
100%.
Like, it's good visual design. Yeah.
Some of the controls on that are a little wonk, but that's why I dropped my gameplay score a little bit. Yeah, this game looks incredible. However, sound. I did not score it incredibly.
I gave it an 8.
Jesus, I gave it a 6.
Okay.
It has sound. It passes on the fact that it has sound. But I mean, I'm going to be 100% honest here. There was not a single sound that I enjoyed.
Oh, really?
Like,
okay.
It was a rough auditory experience for me. I don't know why, but, like, the music was bad. The sound effects didn't hit me the way they should. The only sound effect that really got me were the atmospheric ones. But, like, the battle sounds and the QTE sounds were, like, grating and rough for me. And I get
that.
It felt much more like Friday the 13th and less like Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, this game could have had some badass bangers, and it would have been awesome. It had enough locations where each location has a different atmospheric theme that works well, and it didn't really do that for me. So, if we were in Shark Tank, because of that, I'm out. That's where I am. I just couldn't do it, man.
That's fair. That's fair. It might be kind of coasting off the goodwill from the other categories, but yeah, I was thinking, like, I don't know. I feel like it's in the 7 and 8 range for me on sound. Ultimately, I went a little higher just because, like, sitting here talking to you now, I can recall a couple tracks. Like, they made enough of an impression, and I enjoyed them enough where I remember the melody. And I think they all worked to establish the atmosphere sufficiently.
Is that based on enjoyment or based on the fact that they were just always playing the same melody over and 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 over again? Because there are melodies that I can recall, but it's not because they were good. It was because they are lodged in my brain.
Yeah, no, that's fair. There isn't much of a range. Maybe I'm being a little too generous. I don't know. But I quite liked some of the music walking around the mansion. I did. And most of the sound effects, they're not stellar, but they sufficiently described what they're doing. It just felt like, it felt like a B to me. You know, it's like you understood the assignment, and some things were better than they had to be. Everything was functional, and then I actually did like some of the music. But nothing is like, I'm not going to be whistling it after the fact. You know what I mean? There's no Nightmare on Elm Street level of banger.
I get that. Like, you went that way, and I went almost the mirror opposite, where it's like, you did your job. You did a decent enough job at it. But you did things that were a little worse than I would have wished you would have done. So it's like, I initially gave it a C, and then bumped it down just a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, I think you're probably the better critic on this one. I was so impressed with this game that I have a lot of goodwill, and I'm bringing that into the sound, maybe.
Okay, so because of that, I have a feeling what your fun factor score is going to be.
Yeah, I gave it a 9.
I was gonna guess a 9. Believe it or not, I gave it an 8.
Okay.
I hated this game. I hated this game like the movies that I bring to you, that then you come on the podcast and are like, why the fuck did you do this to me, Bo? Like, the entire time that I played this game, I was like, why the fuck did Brandon do this to me? I'm not good at this at all. But here's the thing. I like RPGs. I like survival horror. I love Resident Evil. I love Final Fantasy, much like yourself. If I would have walked into this game knowing that it was more RPG than survival horror, which it is, it would probably be a 9, because I would have grinded the first level. I would have gotten my characters up to like level 10 before I even crossed into the courtyard, and we wouldn't fucking need a tonic because we're good to go, baby. Let's fucking kill some hounds and fucking wraiths and shit. Let's get weird with it. But it left such a bad taste in my mouth that there were so many things that were left untold on the fun side of things. Like, wiping your party after playing for 6 hours, you might as well just kick me in the dick. Like, that's what it is. It's a kick in the crotch every time. I just wasted 6 hours of my life, and I don't have a lot of time. But then once I figured out what I'm doing, I'm having a fucking blast, man. I'm going through, I'm finding weapons, I'm finding gear, I'm switching out items between parties. Yes, I don't like the party system, but I can work with it. I don't like the music, but the visuals are so fucking good. Like, it is a good time.
Yeah.
But fuck it. Fuck this game. Fuck this game hard. It is very fun, but fuck this game.
Yeah.
This game is She's the Man. This game is She's the Man. That's what it is.
It's fair. If I weren't able to, if I didn't play it by way of an emulator, and get like, I save scummed a few times after like, especially on like one of my longer streams where I just got a little fed up with it. I'm not gonna lie. I fell into temptation. Like I mentioned before, everyone falling in the pit. Like, fuck this. No, I'm not dealing with the consequences of this. I'm not restarting the game. Load her up. Take her back. You know? Having the ability to do that, like if I hadn't, I think I would be closer to you. Like, I love the things I love about it. I do appreciate them so much, but there are those massive frustrations there along the way. And yeah, man, I don't know. Like, to me, though, that's how it always is playing an NES game, to be honest, because I didn't grow up playing a lot of these. Like, I did mostly at, like, friends' houses. I didn't have an NES. So you do get this in the Super Nintendo era, which is how I started. That was my first console. But they're just so much more forgiving. And it just like, even when NES games are at their best, it's usually like, that's amazing. That's so much fun. God damn it.
Yeah.
No, yeah, this is awesome. Man, I love this. Fuck. You know, it's like that.
I
like
have never been
whiplash.
I have never been so overjoyed and livid playing a game.
Yeah.
Like there was a level of hatred for this game that I don't know that I've experienced before. But at the same time, I was like, I am not finishing this just because of the podcast. Like, I want to finish this game. I'm not doing this because I have to. I mean, I am doing it because I have to, but I'm not doing it just because I have to. Like, I want to see this fucking through.
Yeah.
And I was playing it on a handheld device. So I only had one save state. And if I didn't save every 15 to 20 minutes, I might as well just restart the whole fucking game. And that was very frustrating. But guess what this means?
What's up?
Math Boy has done his Math Boy job. This is an 84.5.
Nice.
This is our third highest scoring game we've ever done.
Yeah, it's deserved.
It's
so what do we got? We got Wukong,
Black Myth,
Castlevania,
and this. So good on you, Sweet Home. Fuck you, Sweet Home, but good on you.
You know, I just one thing I just remembered. I just pulled it up. Adding to the frustration is the manual. Actually, it's one of the final messages in the manual.
Oh no!
That just sort of like taunts you on your way out. Page 36, multiple endings. This game has 5 endings. The ending type depends on how many players escape from the mansion. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
I would like to.
It's very neat. Yeah.
I did get the best ending. Like, I kept everyone alive.
Oh, well, fuck you.
No,
I had 3 people left.
Okay. Ooh, yeah, that would have been really tough at the end.
Yeah. No, 2 of those people died in the last battle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I could see that. Because, like, actually, we didn't talk about the last battle, but I was in there for, like, 20 minutes or something trying to figure out. Because, like, there's, like, the order. You get the hints about the order, about how to use items, but there's, like...
diary, and then coffin, and then tool, and then dress, or whatever the last one is. But it has to be done in a very, very specific order. Otherwise, she just keeps wrecking your shop.
Yeah, and restarting the sequence from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know? Which I thought it was cool, like in a game that didn't have boss battles. It was an interesting encounter. It was kind of puzzly. If you were paying attention and kept track of the hints that you got from NPCs, you knew the exact order. That wasn't the issue. It was like the interstitial actions, like between diary and coffin. Should I attack or should I pray? Sometimes you could sort of intuit it. Sometimes you just sort of had to try it out. Anyway, but yeah, I get that. It was a lengthy battle. But the final message, the intended way to play Sweet Home. The primary way to have fun is to see how many players you can keep alive. So I guess I had the most fun. That's why my score is so high. I had the most fun. Everyone was alive. The enemy difficulty is at a low level that beginners can enjoy, so you can have fun competing with your friends to see how many players can survive using the fewest saves.
Suck my ass, Sweet Home. Suck my ass. I didn't
actually get to the point where enemies weren't. I ended the game. I want to say everyone was at max level, just about. Like, they're all like level 19 or 20. Just because I spent so much time wandering and like fighting everything. And if you get over the hump, then you can just like dispatch enemies easily, and then you just keep leveling up. And I almost always called the other party over, and just got experience for all 5 characters in every battle. Um, so yeah, at the end I was wrecking shit. I really was. I was sitting pretty.
Again, I love this game, but also fuck this game.
So yeah, I had fun competing with my friend. I competed with you. I think.
Yeah,
I
you whipped my ass, is what you did.
Sorry, 10 out of 10 on fun. I beat Bo. 10 out of 10. Let's up that score a little
No,
bit.
10 out of 10 because you had 5 people. I give it a 6 out of 10 because I only had 3 people.
Oh, math boy. Math boy.
Math boy's back and kicking, baby. No, I still give it an 8. I hate this game so much, but it was a good time.
You know, it's also a good time. We've gotten into the history a little bit, but just what this game meant to one of my favorite mediums of entertainment, video games.
Okay.
You're usually our math boy and our trivia guy.
I am normally trivia boy and math boy. Sure.
I found a couple fun things when I was like reading about this game, and I would kind of like to share them.
Are you going to take us to a corner?
I didn't set anything up. I don't even have like a musical interlude track.
I got you, boo.
Okay, let's see if we got this.
I
also know some stuff sometimes.
That wasn't bad.
Okay. Welcome to my corner. I've reinforced it. We have a lot of wood planks piled up. Don't worry, you're not going to fall through the floor.
Good. Even if you walk over it like 5 or 6 times. Yeah.
Yeah. No chairs. The poltergeists tend to throw those around, so we're just going to sit here on the floor. So yeah. Sweet Home. We mentioned it before. Capcom game, 1989. Resident Evil, 1996, from Capcom. Resident Evil was originally designed to be a successor to Sweet Home.
No doubt.
Which you can sort of see a lot of the DNA of this game in that later game. So it is important to the history of one of my favorite gaming franchises. The first Resident Evil borrowed many elements from Sweet Home, including the mansion setting, the puzzles, the item inventory management, the emphasis on survival, and even the door loading screen. Other influences include solving a variety of puzzles using items stored in a limited inventory, while battling or escaping from horrifying creatures, which could lead to permanent death for any of the characters, thus creating tension and an emphasis on survival. In addition, this is the one I like, the turning around zombies' actions in its debut scene were taken directly from the intro to the man enemy in Sweet Home.
I saw that. I recognized that hard.
Really? I didn't. Like the doors thing, like, oh man, I recognize that and so many other things, but I didn't make that connection.
As soon as the man did the whole
zombie.
like swift turnaround motion, I was like, all right, I know what we're dealing with here.
I kind of mentioned some of this stuff before, but according to the game's director, Tokiro Fujiwara, he was able to view the film and use what he wanted to as part of the game and also carefully considered how to go about bringing elements from the movie to the game screen. So close collaboration. I think that's very cool. At the end of the game, you do see in the credits, again, Juzo Itami, the producer of the film, and Kiyoshi Kurosawa, the director of the film, played a role in the game development as producer and supervisor, respectively.
So I would like to point out here, based on this trivia fact, this game was made after the movie had finished filming.
Yes.
So the game is officially not source material. Guys, we're alive. Everything's fine. Podcast not canceled. Everything is good. Everyone just calm the fuck down, all right? We're good. We're fine. Everything's fine.
Yes. Technically, we did not cover the source. You didn't cover the source at all. I kind of pushed it and I was a naughty little.
You're a little imp.
Yeah. So I mentioned some of the movie staff, right? It's an early film from Kiyoshi Kurosawa.
Yep.
Maybe not a household name, but a director that I really enjoy. Cure. Fuck me, Cure is a good movie. I don't know if you've seen Cure.
Yeah, Cure is brilliant.
Very good. But I mean, does some horror stuff, but then also like his film Tokyo Sonata, another favorite of mine. It brought me to tears. It really did. It's a beautiful drama. Highly recommended.
Plus, he's mentioned in Barenaked Ladies 1 week.
Oh, you're thinking of Akira Kurosawa.
No one knows.
That's true. They don't know. No, it's definitely Akira because the line is like Kurosawa, I make mad films. K, I don't make films. But if I did, they'd have a samurai.
Which is pointing out that the Kurosawa they're talking about has movies that don't have samurai in them.
Okay, I don't make films, but if I did make films, they'd have a samurai like Kurosawa, famous for his samurai films.
Huh.
Okay, sorry, folks. We're gonna pivot now. It was a Sweet Home conversation. Now we're doing
we're pivoting away from the brilliant Canadian band Barenaked Ladies. It could be any Kurosawa. All right, I'm just saying it could be any.
Yeah, you get a lot of. It's like the John Smith. You get a lot of very common surnames in Japan. Suzuki is I know so many Suzukis, but like we have a couple famous Kurosawas. We have a couple famous Miyazakis at the moment, right?
Yeah, sure.
You got Hideo Miyazaki with your Studio Ghibli, and you've got Hidetaka Miyazaki with Dark Souls from Soft.
From Soft.
Elden Ring.
Yep. He loves them poison swamps.
Similar situation. Just two prolific directors, same surname, but and both did great work.
Canon. Barenaked Ladies was talking about both of them.
Source not found has stated its claim.
Come at me, Barenaked Ladies. Let's go.
Only half of us, though. I kind of get what they're referencing. I don't think they were talking about Kiyoshi Kurosawa.
Barenaked Ladies, please come at me. Please. I really would love to talk to you about your songs. You're brilliant. I love you.
Speaking of Kurosawa and Itami, so apparently no one has ever seen the original version of Sweet Home, the movie.
Okay.
Well, anyone that didn't see it in the theater. Following the theatrical run, producer Juzo Itami, who also appears in the movie, he does appear in the movie as Yamamura.
Interesting.
You do meet Yamamura in the game.
Yeah.
Older guy that runs the gas station like nearby the mansion that comes in at a moment to save Emmy and then melt before your eyes in really gory fashion.
Yep.
Which I love that. I love the producer of the film stepping in like, yeah, put me in old guy makeup and then just fucking melt me into just a gory mess.
Let's get weird with it.
Yeah. So producer Juzo Itami, who also appears in the movie, took the decision to reshoot and re-edit parts of the film for the home video and TV releases. Kurosawa was infuriated with Itami's decision to alter the film and, in a move that was unprecedented in the Japanese industry at the time, sued Itami and Itami Productions. Kurosawa lost the lawsuit, and Itami Productions was able to redistribute the re-edited film. As a result, the film has since been described as more Itami's film than Kurosawa's, and the original theatrical version remains unavailable.
Huh.
The original 1989 release on VHS and Laserdisc is the only release of the film to date. So I've only seen the recut version. I would love to see the original. I would imagine it's better. That's just my assumption. Based on Kurosawa's later work, he's a phenomenal director. I would like to see that. I don't know that it's extant anywhere.
That's fascinating.
But
that's really interesting.
I'm pushing it today. I'm doing things I'm not supposed to do. Here's another one. This is trivia that's not really related to the game we're talking about. But as I was reading about,
Jesus Christ,
I was reading interviews.
Brandon, you're fucking killing.
We're here in the corner. We're nice
Dude,
and cozy.
You're fucking killing me, man.
Was so interesting. Look, we're talking about Resident Evil. Hey, this game is the source for Resident Evil, which at some point we got to do that.
I mean, yes, we're going to do Resident Evil.
Stuff.
It has bad movies and a lot of sequels. Of course, we're going to fucking cover Resident Evil.
Yeah. I was just thinking about, we were talking about the narrative experience, and it just sort of reconfirmed, like, yeah, let's share this. Because there's a story here. There's a story in this mansion. We know why we're here and what we're doing. Apparently, that was not the case with the original version of Resident Evil. So we give Shinji Mikami a lot of credit. He's sort of the household name that we associate with the Resident Evil franchise, right? Specifically 1 and 4, and then The Evil Within, and just sort of like a godfather of horror games, you know?
Sure.
We don't know as much about Kenichi Iwao. You
never heard that name.
You're giving me, you don't know the name. I hadn't either. Here is an interview with Iwao-san about working on a bunch of different games, but specifically Biohazard, Resident Evil, known in Japan as Biohazard. The question: you're perhaps best known for your work writing the scenario for the original Biohazard. Can you tell us a bit about how you came to be involved in this project? To which he responds, I joined the project in mid-development. Originally, there were no humans in the game, just cyborgs. It was supposed to be a horror game still, but by having these Terminator-style characters, it just wasn't very scary at all. I decided to change up the characters. The initial draft had a mad scientist-like doctor who was doing freakish experiments. I ended up redesigning the characters who would wind up having defining roles in the game, like Chris, Jill, and Wesker, as well as creating the Umbrella Corporation as an enemy and concepts like the T-Virus. I also wrote all the diary entries and files you find throughout the game. And apparently, this interview goes on, and based on some other things I've read, to basically say, like, Shinji Mikami's original idea for the game, there was basically no story.
What the fuck?
So the fact that Sweet Home, you know what? Sweet Home had that story, baby. Sweet Home had that story. There was never any question. There's never any doubt. We had a movie to establish the characters and what they're doing there. But I'm curious now. I know it's kind of like that's not what we're talking about today. I had to share that. Like I couldn't leave that. I couldn't hold on to that for a year or however long it's going to take us to get to Resident Evil.
That's wild because
I've never heard that bit of trivia.
Because like Sweet Home story is basically The Ring, but the mom's pissed off and not the daughter.
Yeah. So pissed off. Like, was it clear from the game? Like she basically wasn't watching her kid.
Yeah.
And let the kid play its way into the furnace and then just like, fuck it, like fuck the world. I'm just going to burn every neighborhood kid in my furnace just as vengeance for like neighbors that didn't have any role in this. They didn't have anything to do with that shit.
So I have one last thing before we start doing housekeeping, and it's a wild fucking connection to other NES games. So Friday the 13th, your pitchfork is your strongest weapon in the game. This game,
yeah,
the pitchfork is the strongest weapon in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Nightmare on Elm Street, shit gets burned in a furnace. This game, shit gets burned in a furnace.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we are looking at a shared cinematic universe.
Ooh.
A source not found cinematic universe.
Do you want to share a universe with LJN?
Were there bugs in this game? There were bats. Were there bugs?
Were worms.
Worms? They don't count. I was hoping to
They're more of a bug than a fucking bat.
Fuck you. No, I was trying to think like what else was in Beetlejuice that could possibly fit. I know a bug is not a fucking bat, Brandon.
No, I'm thinking too. Well, I mean, Beetlejuice would be right at home squishing this stuff, right?
Oh yeah,
he'd go to town on those worms. He'd probably kick over the evil doll, and then he'd get his ass handed to him when he tried to stomp on, I don't know,
the Hound.
The Rays would just like
go through
carry him away and just fling him to some other part of the mansion.
Fucking hated that. Okay, gang, what a fucking day. All right, Sweet Home did great. I mean, brought to the table 84.5. That's a damn good score, especially for an NES game. And I'm not a retro player. So good on you. Happy spooky season. You can contact us at our email at sourcenotfoundpod@gmail.com. All of those social medias at Source Not Found Podcast, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Discord. We're on there. Check us out.
We are. Come join the server.
And lastly, guys, we have a Patreon, and it's real good. This month we did a Phobia Goria, which is bringing back all those fears from childhood, except this time we talked to our patrons and got all of their good stories, and I've had nightmares 3 times. It's been awesome.
Speaking of awesome, shout outs to all of our patrons on the Founders and Sorcerers tier. We've got Frederick V. Bear Vorhog, Susie Daggs, Jacob Fidel, Joey Bishop, and 13th Horseman.
Friendship.
Thank you all so much.
Brandon, what's going on the old Twitch stream now that you're done with Sweet Home?
Yeah, so also plug our YouTube. So all the Sweet Home streams are up on YouTube, as well as our podcast here. You can listen to it there if you so choose. So check us out. Same name, Source Not Found. Yeah, Sweet Home is done. It's spooky stuff all month long. We got Silent Hill. We got Ill Bleed. I'm going to try and fit in some more Fatal Frame, maybe. But yeah, it's really just about how many spooky things I can get to in the weeks remaining.
I love that.
But yeah, come on by. It's all nothing but spooky stuff all month long. So come on by. See what I'm playing next. Twitch.tv/LegionBug. Showdown in the link down in the show notes.
Showdown in the link notes. Link down in the show notes. Whatever.
Yeah.
For Halloween this year, guys, we do have a very, very special episode coming your way. I don't want to spoil it yet because it's real good. It's real good. Brandon, I do have to ask you before we sign off about toilets. Is there a spooky season movie you're watching right now?
Honestly, no. I'm looking for some recommendations. Maybe I've just been playing scary games. What you got?
I was gonna ask our listeners, drop us an email, send us some spooky season ideas for movies. I mean, I'm gonna do Tucker and Dale versus Evil, maybe some Slither.
Yeah.
The Frighteners. Oh my God, The Frighteners. Please tell me you've seen The Frighteners.
I love The Frighteners. It's great.
Okay, we're good
time.
Then.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of Peter Jackson horror movies, Dead Alive is a favorite of mine to return to again and again. So yeah, if we're talking about old favorites and not new ones, I do tend to watch the Evil Dead movies every year. I'm a teacher, so I have a lot of Halloween stuff to prep for, making stuff for games and stuff for our school Halloween parties. So I do tend to put on Army of Darkness and let it go a few times in the background as I'm crafting and making shit.
Yeah.
Probably do that again this year.
Awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, hit us with some good recommendations. I'm looking.
Yeah, hit us with them. And at that, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate every single one of you.
Thank you so much.
And don't forget to check your toilets for Mamiya. She's there. Always.
And check the furnace for your fucking kid. Jesus Christ.
Don't leave your babies in a furnace, people. Lord.
Or if you do, don't blame your fucking neighbors. Jesus Christ.
Okay.